Right, a very, very warm good evening to you. My name's Charlotte Badarello. I'm Deputy Head Teacher at Theale Green School. I know that I've met most of you over the last couple of years or so. And I just want to say thank you very much for joining us on this evening, where we'll be explaining a little bit in terms of the year ahead and how we anticipate Year 11 to go, how it fits in terms of students and their futures. And yeah, hopefully to be able to answer some of those questions that I know that you probably do have. So ordinarily this event is run live, and unfortunately due to COVID that's not possible. So this event is virtual, and we'll be sharing a recording of it afterwards, so you'll be able to look back over if there's anything that you've missed out. But as I said, the purpose of this evening is to really share some of those key messages in terms of Year 11 and how we can work together between schools, families and students to really achieve the best outcome for everyone. So Year 11 is a challenging yet really exciting year for students, and there's obviously lots of reasons involved where the challenge comes from, but the exciting bit comes in terms of how it links in terms of pupils and their futures. And I think just one thing just to really remember is back in March, just before we went into lockdown, Mrs. Halliday led a series of assemblies, and she was very much talking about the fact that only control what you can control. And in terms of this, the thing that we know that our students can control is the learning and the preparation it takes involved with these exams. So Year 11 had a fantastic start back at school, and it's now really just the time in order to step up and reach the potential that we know that they truly have. So I'm going to take you through a series of slides. So I'm going to talk first, then we'll have Mr. Taplin, our assistant head teacher, talking in terms of revision strategies and how we can help there. Then Miss Saunders, who's our head of mathematics, will be talking through from a maths perspective. Mr. Punnett will be talking from a science perspective, and then Miss Bevan from the English perspective. And then we will have an opportunity, so if you do have any questions, please raise those through the chat function, and we'll be answering those at the end. And if you could just make sure also that you keep your mic off during the session, that would just really help. And as I said, we will be sending out a copy of the video tomorrow. Whoops. So if in terms of Year 11, so I think for many students, this is obviously the first public examinations that students will be undertaking, and particularly in the context of what happened this summer with regard to centre assessed grades, I imagine you've got lots and lots of questions in terms of how this year is going to pan out. And in terms of, but I think the most important thing is think in terms of individual people and in terms of where you actually want this journey of life, where you want that to take you to. So some of you have very clear plans in terms of future destinations. Some of you, your plans may be not quite as thought through at the moment, and you're just considering your options. But the most important thing is to recognise that this journey is based on lots of individual steps, but the most important thing is to actually make a start on that journey. And that's what we've noticed with Year 11s. They're starting to step up in class and really starting to put into practice what they need to know, and very much we're here to guide you along the way. So in terms of Year 11, you are our #1 priority as a school, and we've given certain privileges to recognise that. And very much you are now the young leaders of our school, and there are certain expectations that go alongside with that. And our teachers, we are absolutely ready for this journey, and we're all on the same team. We're all fighting for the same outcomes. And back during lockdown and over the summer holidays, we've done a huge amount of work to ensure that teaching and learning, so high quality teaching and learning, is at the heart of what we are doing. In terms of the outcomes, as I said, everyone is fighting for exactly the same thing. And I think students just need to recognise that if there's anything that they're not quite sure of, just to open up those avenues of communications with their teachers, just so we can really help answer any questions that you may have. But nonetheless, Year 11 is a very, very exciting year ahead. And the reason behind that is because you started to think about careers and how this fits in terms of the jigsaw that life can be. And with regards to that, Dr. Richards, who's our head of sixth form, she's overseeing a significant piece of work in terms of careers education, and there are lots of really exciting things that we'll be doing along the way. So inviting employers in to speak to students, having the mock interview day just before Christmas. Every student will have an opportunity to meet a careers advisor, and really trying to get that link between year 11 and the next steps. Unfortunately, we weren't able to run the work experience back in the summer, but we've got something exciting to run in place of that just before Christmas. So in terms of future destinations, so some of you will be thinking along the lines of sixth form, and this is the slide that I showed last year actually. So we can't put up the results from this year because obviously that was based on centre assessed grades, but we're incredibly proud of our sixth form and the students that we have in our sixth form and the destinations that students go on to achieve. And we have an incredibly strong reputation beyond Theale actually, and as a consequence to that, we've had 16 students join us in year 12 from other schools, and they're joining us because they recognise the fact that our sixth form is incredibly strong, and there's a huge support network there in terms of this. And just if I can talk a little bit in terms of some of the destinations that students go on to achieve. So for example, we've had students this year gone off to study medicine, study law. We've had students engaging in incredible graduate level apprenticeships. So one student who starting salary mid-£20,000, and his company will actually sponsor him to achieve his degree. So incredible destinations. Last year we also had one student who's in this photo who's actually gone on to, off to America for a golf scholarship, which is incredible. So that's going to pay for him to be a professional golfer, and his future is very bright indeed. But all of our students achieve incredible destinations, and that's one thing that we know that we do very well. So in terms of this year and in terms of the exams, obviously there's a huge number of unknowns, and unfortunately we don't have the answers to some of the questions you may have at the moment. If you look up online in terms of the exam dates, so they will have some provisional dates on there. I believe those were published pre-COVID because they've not established what's happening for this summer. I believe that's because they're still waiting to see how things will evolve. But once we find out any information, we'll let you know, but chances are we'll find out actually at the same time. So in terms of the format and the duration of the exams, at the moment there's no changes to that. A really good point just to kind of throw to you is that if you look on the Theale Green website, there's an exams guide for parents and students, and that's worth your while taking time just to look through that in terms of what to expect. Some of the confirmed changes that we've had though is that for art and design there are no practical exams, so that's a huge element of work which has been taken away from our students so they can focus more on the portfolios. For geography there's no fieldwork element. For science, as it says there, it's observation rather than participation in practicals. For history and many other subjects, it'll be a choice of questions as opposed to having to answer all the questions. For physical education, students will be assessing 2 sports rather than 3. And then with English, there's lots of elements that Miss Bevan's going to be talking about in a few moments' time in terms of the changes to the syllabus there. So in terms of the year ahead, so broadly speaking, we know there's about 30 weeks in terms of year 11, which seems crazy because obviously we only started back 4 weeks ago. But it's this idea of getting prepared for the final race, so to speak. So year 10, this is kind of how we were. So we were on the starting blocks, we were finding our way through our subjects, and really seeing how that could, how that would work out for us. So this is where we're at October. So we know that we're not quite match ready, so to speak, at the moment, and that's fine because it's very much about how you make best use of the time that you have available. And obviously we'll be sending reports home throughout the year to help explain that to you. So your first report will go home just before October half term, and that will be an indicator in terms of how your child is doing. Then in January 2021, you will be sitting your mocks. Now, obviously from the centre assessed grades that happened this year, mocks took on an importance in a way that hasn't previously happened. So just really important that, you have that as a key focus point, and we place them in January on purpose so that students have basically the best of the autumn term in order to prepare for that. You then have the final GCSE exams, and as to the timings of those, we're unclear about that at the moment. But before the real GCSE exams, there will be a second set of core exams which will take place in March time. So this I thought was quite poignant. So sometimes, you know, people get overwhelmed with, you know, what do you want to do? Where does the future lie? And I think it's really important to think about what you do want to do. What are your interests? And instead of just seeing that as the overwhelming, you know, goal that's unattainable, actually try to break that down into small, manageable steps. So as it says there, a goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. A plan backed by action becomes reality. And I think with that, you know, just consider that when some of your friends may say, oh, well, I haven't revised for this test or so forth, that's quite a common thing that people actually say, but the reality could be somewhat different. So just take that with a slight pinch of salt. But the most important thing that you can do is actually do something about it. So when you're thinking about revision plans, sometimes people think, well, I'm going to wait until I'm in that perfect moment to then start my revision. But in actual fact, you started your revision already. You started it, you know, going all the way back to year 7, for example, for the core subject. So that's just a consideration. This is quite a poignant picture as well. So Ant Middleton, I don't know if you've seen him on, so he's the star of the SAS programs, and he very much talks about the fear bubble, and it's about the fact that you have something that you know is going to be a challenge, so not impossible, but a challenge, and it's about how you rise to that challenge. And the bottom line is that when you're on Mount Everest, once you go above 8,000 meters, so once you pass the base camps and so forth, you're in something that's described as the death zone. And at that point, you're fully committed, and there's no choice other than just going for it. And that's what I think our Year 11s really need to do. So there's obviously no death zone in terms of GCSE exams, let me just be clear about that, but it's about making the most of the opportunity you have. Don't wait until, you know, everything's just perfect, because do you know what, that perfect moment may or may not come. Start putting things into place now, and that will actually relieve a lot of the stress. A small thing that we are doing to help, because I appreciate that parents, you're probably sitting there thinking, goodness, how can I actually help? And what we've actually done is purchase this small guide, which will be given to each student tomorrow during tutor time. And if you take that away and read through it together, I think at the weekend, that's just it's got some really interesting strategies in terms of what you can do as parents to help. So please take a moment to read through that. And then also in terms of this year, really thinking of it as your time to shine. I've seen that the most incredible journeys in terms of students, you know, going from people who were quite nervous to being very confident public speakers, students who may not have achieved the grades they wanted to in year 10 and then end up with the most incredible GCSE results. So this is absolutely your time to shine, and we're here to support you for this. And it's just a consideration if it's time to be selfish. So think about what you actually have going on in your life. What things are you going to have to maybe put on a pause in order to create time for you to focus on your studies? It is time to be resilient. So if you get a mark or a test result that you're not happy with, it's about not giving up and thinking, right, well, that's it. It's about what you can do and using that as a learning opportunity to really move on and make fantastic progress. Time to be mature. We mentioned the fact that, you know, year 11, you're now one of the oldest in your school, which is incredible to think. Actually, time seems to have flown very, very quickly. And then lastly, it's about time to be ambitious, and we're talking about being ambitious for yourself, not setting lower standards for yourself than need to be. Very much thinking forward in terms of the future. And last thing from me before I hand over to Mr. Taplin is just this little reminder, you know, don't necessarily compare yourself to other people. We're all unique. Everyone has their place in life and everyone's on their own particular journey. All you can be is be the best possible version of yourself. And it's about being able to look in the mirror and know that, you know, in spite of whatever challenges may or may not have come through this year, the fact that you've overcome them and you have become the best version of yourself, and then you ended up with the results that you are pleased and happy with. So I'm going to pass over to Mr. Taplin at this point, and then I'll come back right at the end, and we'll just last little bit and we'll have a couple of questions. So if I can hand over to Mr. Taplin.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Ms. Badarello. So I'm going to talk to you about revision strategies and techniques. And often students know they need to be doing some revision at home. And year 11s, I'm sure you know you need to be doing revision. But it's often the question of kind of, why do I need to be doing revision, and how do I need to do revision? And that's what I'm going to kind of guide you through the next 5 or 10 minutes. So the first thing is what's the point? What's the point of revision? The first thing is to actually go back over. By going back over things, you're actually reinforcing knowledge. You're going to be learning that knowledge and keeping that knowledge ready for the exam. The next thing, and maybe important for some of you, is that it's going to help close gaps. It's going to help you go back over things that you didn't get first time. And everybody in every subject, in every lesson, will have things that they don't quite get. And by you going back over them, you're going to close those gaps, which give you a better opportunity for your exams. The fourth thing is obviously you have got these final exams, and you're working towards getting the best grades possible. And to echo what Mrs. Badarello said, you know, you're putting the effort in here. If you've got that goal and that dream, get those top grades, it comes from doing this revision. The fifth thing is about memory. The more revision that you can do, the more structured revision that you can do, the more different techniques that you can do, evidence suggests that you will commit things to long-term memory. You'll commit that knowledge into the long-term memory. So when you're sitting in the exam, you're actually going to be learning that memory and using it. Doing active revision is really, really important. Lots of students say, oh, I've read through notes. And actually, just reading through something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stick. Doing something with that work, doing something during revision is going to help and make it stick for you. And finally, what's the point? You're sitting a 2-year linear course with your exams at the end of the course. You're going to have learned a lot from year 10 and year 11. And the earlier you start revising, going back over things and breaking things down, the better things are going to come for you when it comes into the exam. So continuing to the next slide, what's the point? If you look at this flow diagram, if you relearn a topic and then the next day go over that topic again, and then a week later go back over that topic, and then a month later go back over that topic, you do it spaced, you do it interleaved, so that you revise your knowledge, so that by the time you come to the exam, you've gone over that knowledge so many times that it's fresh in your head and it's not something you haven't looked at since year 10. And I'll show you in a minute some techniques that really help you. So in terms of doing revision, make sure it's active. Don't just read, actually do something with it, whether that's mind maps, notes, revision cards. Testing is a really, really good thing to do. There's mini tests online, and I'll give you some links to those in a minute. And you can do exam papers and past papers as well. By doing exam papers, as you get close to the exam, doing them in time conditions at home is a really, really good technique. It will make sure that you can answer the full paper in the time allowed, and it'll also show you where your gaps are online. Online websites, there's loads out. There's been even more developed during national lockdown, and there's specific websites that your teachers will be able to guide you to, and I know some of you do use those in subject. Online websites are a really good way. A really popular way among students is mind maps. And in a minute, I'll show you some specific examples. It's really good when you've got a lot of factual knowledge that you need to categorize and remember specific subjects, maybe like history and geography, or like science, where you've got specific keywords and terminology that you need to remember. A technique that's really popular amongst our students here is the revision clock. And this really helps structure down time. If you're one of those people, a bit like me, where you'll set something off for an hour and you'll get easily distracted, and then you'll end up not doing the things you need to do in that hour, a revision clock is something that can really help structure your revision time down. Flashcards is the next one. We'll probably all have used flashcards in the past and probably know what flashcards are, but there's a such specific scientific way that flashcards can be used. And I'll talk about flashcards in a second. And then finally, almost every single subject has revision guides available. I know a lot of subjects we send out letters about revision guides, and there's certain electronic revision guides, and there's even applications now for revision guides, and they help with doing the revision. So, mind maps. The basic idea behind a mind map is to think about a topic. a general topic, maybe, for example, that has a few subtopics linked to it, and then breaking those subtopics down into some key ideas. And by using different colours and images to structure that knowledge, the evidence suggests that the brain remembers that knowledge better, and you can recall that knowledge better in the exam. So as an example, on the next slide, you'll see global warming. This is a student who's broken it down into the causes, the solution, the evidence, and the theory of global warming. And you can see they put pictures in it. But what's interesting about this example is there's not lots of long sentences. There's factual information, and there's keywords, and there's pictures that will help remember it. Now, for some students, the use of colour, you can see solutions all in green and evidence is all in blue and causes all in red, helps the brain remember that knowledge and can use that. If you've never done a mind map before, it might be something that you try with a technique, try with a subject that has a specific topic, and you might find that you remember that knowledge a lot better. The next one is flashcards. These have grown massively in the last year, so you can quite easily get some flashcards or record cards from WH Smith's or Sainsbury's or Tesco's. What a lot of students do, and this isn't the best way of doing it, is they write down everything onto a flashcard, everything about a topic. And actually what's better is to have a question on one side and the answer on the other side. So you can see here, these are some examples from a Collins website, which I'll give you a link to later on in this slide, where it has a question on one side and then the potential answers on the other. And what students can do is write their flashcards out, and then they can take 10 or 15 flashcards and test themselves on those. If they get those right, they don't need to test themselves on those for a couple of days. If they get them wrong, they need to come back to them and test themselves tomorrow. And the idea is that the more times you go over those more ones that you get wrong, you're going to commit those ones to long-term memory. If you get it right on the first time, there's no point in checking it the following day because you've got it right. But come back to it in a few days. And then by structuring flashcards that way, you're more likely to remember that knowledge for exam. The next one is the revision clock. It's quite popular in schools. And the idea is you set yourself an hour. So you've got a clock in the middle, and this example here is split into 5-minute chunks, so between 12 and 1 and 1 to 2. And you choose a topic, and this could be a set of maths equations that you need to learn and do model answers with. It could be the causes of World War for history, for example. And you go around and set small questions in each of the subsections in those 5 minutes, and you write down things that you know about it. And you use your revision guide and you use your notes to reduce down the information in it. So you can see an example next there of some arid grassland case study where it's been reduced down and that key case study information has come out. It almost has the feel of a mind map, but by structuring it down into 5 minutes, it means you're going to be able to keep going and keep motivated for that hour. So that's a good technique. Past papers, I can't stress enough past papers. We use them in lessons. Students will bring them home when they do their mocks. And there's lots of different ways you can use past papers. One way, and this is not cheating, by the way, some people think, oh, this is cheating, is actually do a past paper with a mark scheme. Right? That might be the first step for some of you, is get a copy of the mark scheme, get a copy of the past paper, and work your way through and see how the marking is happening. Then maybe next time do a past paper without the mark scheme and work your way through. And if you get stuck, just move on, but then use the mark scheme to come back to it. And as I said earlier, doing some time practice is really, really good idea. And the more practice you do, the more types of questions you see, the more times you have a go at doing these types of questions. And the evidence all suggests that you're going to end up with a better grade when you come to GCSE. There's a whole list of websites here, and obviously you'll be able to access these when you get a copy of the resource. And if I just kind of guide you through them, Seneca Learning is a free online source, great particularly for GCSE Science, and there's exam board specific questions on there where you do a little bit of reading. There's some multiple choice questions, there's some word filled activities. It's really active. Gojimo, similar to Seneca Learning, as websites for each subject. BBC Bite Size, we're all familiar with. That has grown hugely over lockdown. There's some fantastic resources there, and that link there will take you direct to the GCSE pages. The Collins website, the fourth one down, some free revision resources. That's where there is available some flashcards for you to print and cut out, like I showed earlier, and there's quite a lot of subjects on there. Quizlet is a growing resource, which is almost like interactive flashcards. There's also some multiple choice questions on there, split down by subjects and topics. StudyWise is another one that has notes on that you can use. And there's also some that you may wish to download called the Anki Revision app. There are free versions available for both iPhone and Android phones. There are also some paid versions where there are some flashcards created, which you use your phone to do the flashcards. You can also create your own flashcards on your phone. So if you're sitting on the bus on the way to school and you're a little bit bored, you can get your phone out and do some revision there. And what it does, if you get the answer right, it will automatically move that to 3 days ahead. So you won't see that flashcard for another 3 days. If you get it wrong, it will get you to test it the following day. So what it works out is your knowledge you need to revisit and the knowledge that you're slightly better on, and it structures down your revision really well for you. I can't stress that enough. I used it with my daughter during lockdown to help with their times tables. My daughter's in primary school, and it's really, really good. Revision plans are something that is going to help you a lot. So with a revision plan, it's really important that it's realistic. So the example you've got just coming up on the screen is a realistic one. You can see there, it says home from school. You can see that snack and a rest has been built in. It's realistic. It's not coming home from school and working from 3:30 to 10 o'clock at night. But that revision plan is detailed. It clearly shows which subjects are being done at what time on each day. It's structured down nicely and it's detailed. But a revision plan also needs to be flexible. There'll be times when you might feel a little bit ill. There'll be times when something happens and you can't quite stick to it. And that's fine, all right? Flexibility can be built into a revision plan. So this example here is over a week, and the other example, which is about to appear, hopefully, also has that as an example. There it is, there's the other one. And so you can see this is been start over a monthly period, and you can see subjects have been put in that are going to be focused on there. So you could do it by day or you could do it by time. There's 2 links there that can help you with actually planning revision planners. As a school, we are going to offer some intervention revision sessions. And I'll be writing to you next week about this specifically, but they're going to begin on the 12th of October, which is a week A, so in a couple of weeks' time. The letter's going to contain all the details. For most subjects, there's going to be 1 session every fortnight for an hour from about 3:15 to 4:15. There's slight variations on the revision for art and technology because of the change of the exams and also the way that science and English will run them, and all that will be explained in the letter for you. Science, because there's 3 subjects, we'll have it out on a rotation basis, and English is going to be a lot more targeted. The letter that comes home is going to have a link for parents to fill in. It's really important that's filled in because it's after school and because of the risk assessment currently in place in the school. We do need permission for your child to be able to attend after school. It's a very short form. It will take about 10 to 15 seconds just free. But do watch out for that letter coming home tomorrow. So why start now? Why start now? If you look at this curve line, you'll see there's the red line and the yellow line, the green line, and then the blue line towards the end, the light blue line. The more times that you revisit something, the more you remember. So if you start earlier, that means you're going to have more time to go over stuff, more time to revisit stuff, which means you're going to forget less of that knowledge. And if you start as soon as you can, that means you're going to be able to go over a lot more knowledge, and that means you're going to have a lot more committed to your long-term memory before you go into it. It's really, really important to try and get yourself going. And here's just some final top revision tips. So start as early as you can, make a plan, use your revision links that I've sent, create a nice study space at home where you could be quiet away from distractions, maybe hand your mobile phone over, and mix things up. Don't just stick with one subject, don't just stick with one technique. Make sure you take and build in regular breaks, right? Or your brain will get tired and it won't focus. Revising with friends is a really, really good way. You know, obviously sticking to the rule of 6, but you could use Zoom or WhatsApp, things like that. Using past papers, already said, and feed your brain. Eating healthy will also make a difference. So hopefully that's useful. There's a lot in there, obviously I know you can go back over to. And I'm now going to hand over to Miss Saunders, who's going to guide you through the mathematics for GCSE.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be able to talk to all of Year 11 and some parents this evening. What I just want to talk about initially is the exam board that we're going with. So the decision was made that we're going to go with the AQA exam board. So for those of you that are looking at any resources online, we're looking at AQA 8300. And in terms of maths, there is still a tiering system in maths. So the decision will be made later on in the year as to whether children are entered in for the higher or the foundation paper. That is something we do with the teachers based on sort of how performance in mock has done and any teacher decision. In terms of the paper, so students actually had a good practice of it yesterday. I did feel very proud standing at the front of the gym where they were all sitting ready to take their mock exam, and they did all do really well. You should be really proud of how you did in that. So it's broken down into 3 exam papers. These will all be sat this summer. So you've got 1 non-calculator paper and then 2 calculator papers. So each of the papers allocated 80 marks. So in total, they're looking to try and get the maximum marks out of 240. Now, the reason I put a picture of a calculator is just to reinforce the value of actually getting a calculator early on. Now, a lot of students do already have their calculator and they bring it to every single math lesson, which is brilliant. However, not getting it or leaving it right till the last minute means quite often students don't have any idea how to work it. There are some functions on a calculator that they might not have come across before. So particularly a scientific calculator, and I know Mr. Punnett will agree with me on this, it's useful in science as well as in maths, so it's not a wasted expense at all. My first key point is practice, practice, practice. It is so important in maths to just drill home those key skills, get loads and loads of practice, making sure you've actually mastered a skill before you move on to something new. Doing more maths is never going to impact negatively on how well you're going to remember it and how well you're going to perform. So the more you can expose yourself to different styles of questions, different types of questions, the more prepared you are going to be for those final exams. Another key part to being successful in GCSE maths is identifying your areas of weakness. So after mock exams in January, we'll, as a department, we will produce a lovely sheet for them, for the students, which they'll be able to use to identify areas of weakness or relative weakness that then they can focus on moving forward. So they can then look at topics that actually, oh, I've lost the marks on that this time. How can I look to improve that moving forward? Additionally to that, with our years of experience in the maths team, we are good at knowing what topics are going to come up. So we will prepare students and let them know that definitely going to be this type of question. Make sure you have nailed this type of question. So in the coming weeks and months leading up to the exam, they'll have great exposure to those sort of topics. And finally, I don't know if students have highlighted this to parents, but what we've implemented this year or continued from last year is doing Past Paper Friday, which is more helpful now than ever. It gives us an opportunity to revisit topics. We take sometimes a couple of different topics and we'll revisit them with exam questions, or sometimes just one topic that we may have reviewed that week, maybe a few weeks before. With some of the groups, we've been going back to things we've done in year 10. So we're making use of that time to reflect back on topics that we've done before. So a few key hints. Some of these might be obvious, however, students do often need reminding this. So ways to maximise marks in an exam. Firstly, I put again another picture of a calculator. If there is a calculator available, make use of it. And in a way, make use of it correctly. So ensure that, yes, you are using it to find an answer, but anything you are inputting into that calculator is then being written down in the exam. Sadly, the examiner cannot see what's on the calculator screen, so they really do need that evidence put down. I put an example at the bottom of this page on the left-hand side of a type of question that's very typical at GCSE, and it has this final sentence: you must show you're working. And I quote this to students very often and say, if it has that sentence, you will not access any marks unless you put some working down. So that is something to highlight, that if there is no working available, even a correct answer will be ignored. Second thing, don't race through. You have an hour and a half for each paper. Make sure you use your time wisely. If that does mean going to the back of the paper and starting with the most difficult questions and seeing how much you can do of that before going back to the multiple choice, that's fine. Find a strategy that works for you. And through lots of exam practice before that, you will be more confident in what's best. Next thing is, and this again at the bottom question, make sure you've answered the question. So this one says, do you agree with Jamie's statement? If you haven't written yes or no, you might be jeopardizing that final mark. So just check at the end, have I truly answered that question? The next point, again, it's an obvious one, but please, please, please make sure you put some thought into a multiple choice question. Just because there are options there doesn't mean you're just going to circle it and move on. Make sure you're happy and you're confident. Why is it this one? It might be 1 mark, but that 1 mark could be the difference in a grade. And on the flip side, never leave it blank. If you're not sure and it's the last 5 minutes of the paper, have a go. Maths and probability is on your side in that sense. Making sure you use a ruler and a pencil really carefully. So if you are drawing a straight line graph, make sure the line is straight, use that ruler. They're expecting you to be able to use that by year 11, so do that please. And then, as I say, write down your evidence for calculators. So here are just a few things that I want to talk about that you can use to support your son or daughter over the next year. The first resource, which I'm hoping loads of you are already used to, seen it on computer screens or phones, which is this program called MathsWatch. MathsWatch, honestly, is brilliant. I have to say, whoever invented it, I remember using it for myself at GCSE. It's long since progressed, but it is brilliant. The thing that I think is going to be most invaluable to students is the search function. So what students are probably used to is teachers setting them assignments. So we'll say, you're going to do some questions on equations, and that's all they have access to. Students may not be aware that actually they can search for topics they want to revise themselves. So if you go into the video section, you select GCSE, there is a search bar, and that will allow you to search for a topic specific to what they need. So relating to that question level analysis we spoke about earlier, that is really relevant. The next 2 pictures are revision guides and workbooks. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to send out a letter asking or requesting who would like to purchase those, and we'll buy those in centrally. We'll get them at a slightly discounted price. So I would highly recommend getting both the revision guide and the workbook as something that can be used at home to support learning. Another website I would highly recommend is something called Corbett Maths. And on Corbett Maths, it again has further videos, explanations, alongside some practice questions and topic-based questions. So if a student particularly struggling on quadratic equations, they can log on to that website, search for quadratic equations and practice lots and lots of the same type of question. Okay, not necessarily a final preparation, but could be used earlier on in their revision time. And moving on, sorry, I'm talking a little bit too much. So finally, what I'd like to pass on to you is this is the sort of cycle that I see students working through. These are the most successful students, and this is what they do. They'd start with some past papers at the beginning of their revision. They'd identify those areas of weakness and what they sort of need to work on. They'd use MathsWatch to visit those topics. Once again, they then practice those specific exam questions, and then they go back and try and put those skills back into practice. So now I'm going to pass on to Mr. Punnett. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mrs. Saunders, for the introduction. I'm going to start by talking about triple science, then I'll move on to combined science. So if you are on the triple science route, you will do 3 separate science GCSEs. Your biology grade will be made from 2 papers, so paper 1 and paper 2. Chemistry will also have 2 papers, and physics also has 2 papers as well. So each of these will give you your grade. And then if we can move on to combined science. For combined science, it is a combination of your scores in biology, chemistry and physics. And again, each type of science has 2 papers. For combined science, you will finish with 2 grades at the end, which will range from 9.9 as the highest to 1.1 as the lowest. If we can move on, thank you. In science, we also offer revision guides. The pictures show you revision guides for combined science. And you can either have the revision guide or you can have the complete revision and practice workbook. And then for triple science, each science has its own revision guide and its own complete revision and practice workbook. Like maths, we will shortly be sending out letters that offer you the opportunity to purchase the books through the school. And again, we can offer a discount on the books. I'd also like to share some revision resources with you. So these are websites that I highly recommend. We have Seneca Learning, which, like Mr. Taplin was saying earlier, offers you the opportunity to answer some questions and it will tell you if you're right or wrong. BBC Bite Size, Free Science Lessons, which is a great website which offers specific science-based learning, and then Caboodle, which again offers specific science-based learning, and for that one you need the institution code FE3. I'd also like to take the opportunity to offer or show you where specifications can be found. So the specifications for biology, chemistry and physics and combined science are all slightly different, and we use the AQA provider for our exams, so these specifications are specific to AQA. And then finally, I'd like to talk to you about some advice from science examiners. So start off with focus on the command words and don't repeat the question. You will not score marks in the exam if you rewrite the question. And also to be aware that describe and explain are not the same. So a description is just a simple sentence to say what something is, whereas an explanation includes a reason as well. Ensure you revise both the year 1 and year 2 content, rather than just focusing on material covered most recently. Examiners also recommend that you cross out wrong answers and rewrite them then, rather than trying to alter your original answer. Attempt every question. Blank spaces are something that examiners really don't like. In science exams, bullet points are allowed, so you don't have to write your answers in full sentences. Even for the long answer questions on science, you can use bullet points. And examiners often find that poor answers are either too short or they're too long. I don't feel that you have to use all the space provided. They don't like rambling and repetitive responses, they prefer concise responses. The practicals are examined. So this year, due to current restrictions, students are unable to do the actual practicals, but they will be able to watch videos of these, and then the practicals are still going to be in the exam. Math skills are examined, so about 15% of the science grade is based on math skills. Same as in maths, as Ms. Saunders said, make sure you lay out calculations clearly, show your working and don't forget to include units. And also for the math skills questions, don't round your answers till the end of the calculation, use the calculator as a memory function, or keep it as a fraction. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Ms. Bevan, and she's going to talk to you about English.
Good evening all. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us to think about year 11 and how we're going to be moving forward this year. The first thing that I really want to draw everybody's attention to is the different exams that students will be sitting. So English comprises of 2 different GCSEs. There's English literature and there's English language. So we're sitting the AQA model. If we just go back one slide to the English literature, there's the layout of the 2 papers. So AQA have actually allowed us to reduce what we need to teach. So they have said that we can have an optional module because students are yet to have studied the 19th century literature, which would have been A Christmas Carol or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We've opted not to teach that section, and so instead students will be focusing on poetry, or they will be and they will be writing about and in spectacles. In the second paper, they will be talking about a Shakespeare play that they've been studying, which is Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth, and then they have a compulsory section on unseen poetry. So that's 2 separate papers, all of which will have studied in detail. Then if you move on to English language, there are another 2 papers, so it's 4 papers overall. In the first paper, they'll be looking at one fiction text, which they've never seen before, and they'll have to answer 4 questions on it, and then write a piece of creative writing. And then in the second paper, they'll be comparing a non-fiction text and one much older non-fiction text, generally pre-1900, which they then have to answer 4 questions on, and then they do a piece of their own non-fiction writing. So next, we need to think about what can we be doing at home in order to help students with their English preparation for their GCSEs. So please do encourage them to attend the intervention, the revision sessions after school. There will be some running, and as Mr. Taplin said earlier, there will be letters out about those. To help your child remember quotations, so they'll need to remember about 25 per text, and that obviously will take lots of practice. So they might need to be tested. You might need to tell them when they've got words wrong. That would be really helpful. Encourage them to reread or watch versions of those texts. And Inspector Calls, Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth all have kind of DVD versions that can be watched and not just read. You might even want to read them or watch it with them. You can also think about timing your child while they complete mock exams at home. So they're very essay-based questions. So each literature essay is no longer than 45 minutes, which they can just sit down and they can do, and they can ask their English teachers for practice papers. It would also be really good if you share your favourite book or poem with your child. In both the language and the literature, they have to read something they've never read before and consider its meaning and its purpose. So if they've been shown lots of text by you, then that's being exposed to as much literature as possible. Something that I know previous students have found really helpful is being able to stick post-it notes around the house. So then when they're kind of brushing their teeth or they're getting something from the cupboard, there's key terminology or quotations around the home, so they're being exposed to that all the time. And then you can grab example papers for both language and literature from AQA using the subject codes at on the previous slides. Just some online resources that we might find useful. Spark Notes give really good summaries of the text that we study. The Gojimo revision app is kind of question and answers and really allows for knowledge-based ideas. The YouTube tutorials that Mr. Bruff and Nick Morgan do, they talk about key themes, they analyse poems, and they're really interactive. Ms. Taplin talked about BBC Bite Size before. Cliff Notes is about summaries, and then Seneca Learning, which Mr. Punnett mentioned, goes through individual lessons where students can quiz themselves on their knowledge of the books that they've read. So that's everything about English. If you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I'll do my very best to help you and your child as much as I can. So back to Ms. Badarello to finish up.
Thank you very much to everyone. So just a couple of important things. So this is just some names of important contacts. So obviously your child has a form tutor. So the email addresses for Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Robinson and Mr. Neal are there. So don't forget class teachers, they're there to support you, as are the heads of department, as are myself and Mr. Taplin. So that's a really important point of contact. The next bit is something really exciting in terms of a bit of motivation for Year 11, and we basically have a whole series of rewards that we are aiming to be giving out to our Year 11s over the course of the year. And here are just the first 6 examples of that, and we got some really amazing prizes to hand out for that. So it's just an opportunity to just keep that motivation going throughout the 30 weeks. To make sure those people who best exemplify our school values and really making that massive impact, that they get recognised for it. And then also just a little reminder that yes, we are in this together. So just, you know, if you need help with anything, just let us know. So what I'm going to do, we've had a couple of questions come through, and I'm just going to ask those to particular members of staff. So if we can start off with Mr. Punnett. So we have a science question for you, and it's about the weighting for combined science. So how does the weighting for combined science, how does that work?
Yeah, so for combined science, biology, chemistry and physics have equal weighting. So students will take 6 papers in the summer, 2 biology, 2 chemistry and 2 physics, and all of their scores will be added together, and then grade boundaries will be set from that. So each paper has equal weighting.
Excellent, thank you very much. So Miss Bevan, a question that's come through is, which is more important, language or literature?
So I would argue that both of them are equally important. It's moving forward, it's all about analysing text, being able to phrase yourself coherently, and employers value both equally. With regards to whether you need to pass both, if moving forward you will need to have passed English, but you can pass either literature or language and that will count.
Excellent, thank you very much. So Miss Saunders, a question in terms of maths, well, in terms of general progress. So what happens if I don't pass maths or English? So what happens in year 12?
So we're hoping this is obviously not going to be the case, but if it does arise that you haven't been successful in passing either maths or English, it is something you are required to continue with. So if you go to a college or a sixth form, it is compulsory for you to continue with retaking your maths or your English or both to obtain a grade 4 or better.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then a final question for Mr. Taplin. So what if someone's not doing particularly well at the moment? How can they get back on track with their revision?
So I'd firstly say it's never too late to start. You know, if you haven't done any revision yet, you can still control that. That's in your hands to do that. You can go away this weekend and start that. The intervention sessions are going to help. They're there to support you. They're there to give you that motivation. They're there to get you going, and that's why we're starting them. You know, in the next couple of weeks. I'd also say that, remember, every year 11 across the entire country is in exactly the same boat as you. You know, they've been experiencing exactly the same thing as you. You know, and if you get started now, you're going to put yourself in a fantastic position. And I'd say the top thing, the first thing in terms of getting yourself going, is get that revision plan sorted. Maybe just nail to the mast a couple of subjects that you're going to look at next week, and to begin with, maybe start with the subjects that you're more confident with, because that will get you going on your revision plan, and then start building in maybe some of the subjects that you know you're going to have to work a little bit harder with. But the key message is never to start too late. Sorry, I totally said that wrong. It's never too late to start, and you can get back on track quite quickly.
Excellent. And if someone needs to access past papers, how can they do that?
Yep, so I mean, there's been a few links obviously throughout this presentation, but you can go directly to the exam board websites. Obviously during the year, you're going to be accessing papers through mocks and through assessments, and obviously you'll be able to use those questions and have access to those. And then a lot of revision guides also have example questions in and past papers that you can also access. So you'll get some from school, obviously some from the exam board, and then some through the revision guides.
Excellent. So just like to take this opportunity to just say thank you very much to everyone for taking the time to come alongside this evening, and we'll be sending the link to this recording out tomorrow. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you.